Welcome, everyone, to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. This is a very special episode because we're being joined by LeBrain Train. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike LeBrain himself, Mike Ladano. And Mike, first of all, thanks for coming on the show. And you got to show us your shirt. You got a cool shirt, man.
Yeah.
The Contrarians.
The wrong album.
Guaranteed. Yes, sir. I got to get me one of those. That is cool.
It came in like 3 days.
Nice.
Yeah.
Faster than Amazon.
That's actually true.
Yeah. Cool. So on this episode, Mike's joined me. We're going to do actually a band I've been a fan of since the very beginning. I've just never done an episode on them for one reason or another. And so I talked to Mike. I said, yeah, let's make this happen. We're going to talk about Mr. Big, specifically our Mr. Big CD collections. There you go. So Mike just held up the first album there. So Mike, Mr. Big is an example of a band that I actually heard of before I heard them. And what I mean by that is before they actually came out.
Yeah, same.
And I'm wondering, given our conversations that we've had on LeBrain Train, if your experience has been similar to mine, when did Mr. Big first come up on your radar?
Around the time Billy Sheehan was let go from David Lee Roth's band, which would have probably reading Hit Parader magazine, probably late 1988. And he was talking about this new project he had called Mr. Big. And the buzzword at the time for a lot of new bands actually was bluesy. And I think that as a general trend in the 80s was a lot of bands trying to imply that they were influenced by Led Zeppelin. But, in Mr. Big's case, I think it was more of a soul thing once I heard Eric Martin. And I just waited and stayed tuned to my TV. And then Much Music one day debuted this video that started with this bass solo. And I knew, right. And I knew that this is the thing that I've been waiting for. And let's get into it, folks.
Yeah, it's very similar with me. I do remember reading that. I think it was in Hit Parader. Chances are it was the same friggin' issue.
Probably.
And the other term that was thrown around a little bit was supergroup.
Yes.
Because everybody in Mr. Big came from varying degrees of credibility, I guess. So Eric Martin was a recording artist in his own right. He did a couple albums as the Eric Martin Band on Elektra, oddly enough, with Troy Luccketta from Tesla on drums and John Nyman, who later joined Y&T on guitar. Bay Area guys.
You would know that.
And then he did a couple of solo albums under his own name on Capitol Records. And a little bit of trivia there. His self-titled album in 1985 actually spawned a song that hit the top 100 in Billboard. It wasn't a top 40 hit called Information. It was a lot popular. But another song that a lot of Canadian rock fans will recognize on that self-titled album is a song called Just One Night, because it was recorded a year later by Triumph.
Yes,
on the Sport of Kings album, co-written by one of our favorites, Neil Sean. And so that's Eric Martin. Billy Sheehan, of course, Talus was his first recording band, but David Lee Roth, Eat 'Em and Smile, he's just all over that. And he was on Skyscraper too, but his playing was kind of muted on that album. Young guitar whiz, I think he was like 22 at the time, named Paul Gilbert, who was in a Shrapnel Records band called Racer X, and sort of a drummer, journeyman drummer who'd been around for a while named Pat Torpey. And most recently, before Mr. Big, he did a tour with none other than Robert Plant himself.
Right.
So with a lot of hype, behind him, Billy Sheehan put this group together. And actually the first I heard Mr. Big was on a syndicated radio show called Metal Shop. Do you remember Metal Shop? The only show with teeth?
No. At that time, I was not listening to the radio.
Okay. This was a syndicated radio show. And at the top 40 station I listened to at the time played it Sunday nights. It was a U.S. show. And they did an interview with Billy Sheehan. They actually played 4 songs off the debut Mr. Big album. I liked them all. But of course, the first single in the video you referred to was Addicted to That Rush, which was the very first cassette single I ever bought.
Wow.
Which I thought was this kind of, the first 2 cassette singles I bought, I found them at the same time. They were just coming out into my area. Was that one, Addicted to That Rush, and Wingers Headed for a Heartbreak. So yeah, I thought they were quite this novelty, this little cardboard case that wrapped completely around. And as you know, sometimes you'd get lucky and there'd be a B-side that was rare. So yeah, so we each have the debut Mr. Big album, Atlantic Records, self-titled, 1989. Mine's a Canadian, or no, sorry, mine's an American Columbia House issue, but I'm guessing that ours look very, very similar.
I would imagine so.
Just the big Mr. Big logo on the back.
I didn't realize they were managed by. I just realized looking at the back, I didn't realize they were managed by Herbie Herbert.
Herbie Herbert, yeah. So the San Francisco, the Journey Connection continues on this debut album because the song "How Can You Do What You Do" was co-written by Eric Martin and Jonathan Cain. Yeah. So there you go. Now honestly, this album didn't live up to its hype as far as record sales. It didn't certify gold, which I don't know. There was a lot of hype behind it, maybe a little bit too much. I don't know. Eric Martin's one of the most soulful vocalists I can think of. I mean, the man could sing the Telephone Book, and it would sound great. And the first album I remember thinking was good, but I was expecting a little more. Mm-hmm. It was fine, but it didn't blow me away. But I knew they had a killer album in them, so I kept on. And of course, Mike loves bonus tracks. The CD had a bonus track. The cassette had a bonus track, which the record did not have. A cover song of Humble Pie's 30 Days in the Hole, actually live. Yeah. And so that was the first album, which kind of came and went, and I've got a cool little thing that I picked up. The Mr. Big were huge in Japan right from the get-go. Yeah. 1990, this comes out called Live, Raw Like Sushi. And,
you've got it.
Yeah. This was recorded, and I thought this was cool. It says right on here, this music is compiled from show on the Rush Presto tour, recorded directly to DAT from the house mixing console. That's cool. 6 songs on this album, all of them from the debut Mr. Big album. Really, really good. I mean, this band was just phenomenal musicians, so they sounded awesome in any environment. Of course, it's Japanese, so it's got the little booklet that comes with it in Japanese. And one of the cool things that's on this is that at the end of the song Take a Walk, at the end of Rock and Roll Over, there's a Paul Gilbert guitar solo. And this is the first time that I heard, view, 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 view. That's when he took the drill out. So this was kind of a very brief trend in 1990, 1991. So somebody got the idea that if you solder like 3 picks on your drill, you can play the guitar at ridiculously fast speeds. Anyway, he incorporated that into his guitar solo, and that's kind of cool. So, of course, the big story, no pun intended, with Mr. Big is the second album. Yeah. 1991. We'll lean into it. Yeah. And I remember buying this album. Buying this album when it first came out, and I thought, this is the album. This is the album I knew they could do. It's probably still their best album all the way through. And it is their only platinum seller, but that's with an asterisk because I bought this album and I had it for almost a year. And I think it was about ready to hit the delete bins. And then much to my surprise, in early 1992, I hear a song they stuck on the very end of the album. We talked about album closers. Yes, that's the one, To Be With You. Little acoustic ballad.
A bit of a throwaway for them.
A bit of a throwaway, almost exactly the Extreme story. Almost exactly the same story. An acoustic ballad, not characteristic of the band sound, and revived the album almost a year after it had been out and went all the way to number 1. It was a number 1 single. Unbelievable. So I was happy for the band because I like this band, so I was happy to see them get the attention. And this is a killer album all the way through. Yes. Green Tinted 60s Mind is just a gorgeous song, which should have been a hit single in its own right. Yes. There's another one of the singles on here, CDFF Lucky this time. I don't know why they bothered with the CD fast forward, but it made everybody think that their CD was skipping. the beginning.
Apparently,
of
that was the intent. I don't know why it was the intent, but what I've read was
That's
the intent.
Well, actually, you know what? I should rewind, because I wasn't buying CDs exclusively at this point. I had this on cassette first, so I knew it wasn't the CD skipping, but I thought something's wrong with this recording. Anyway, that song, by the way, was written by a guy named Jeff Paris.
Yeah.
And look up his songwriting credits. He's also known as Jeffrey Lee. I'll leave it at that. You'll be like, oh, that's where I've seen that name before. It's here, and it's here, and it's here. So this album, this was their one and only platinum album, but it certainly wasn't it for Mr. Big. I mean,
no,
they were on, they just kept on. So the next album came out in 1993. Of course, by 1993, grunge had happened. Melodic rock was on the way out, but Mr. Big still managed to have a minor single off of this album, Bump Ahead. This time around, another acoustic song. They covered Cat Stevens' Wild World. I think it was a top 30 hit for them. This had some Colorado Bulldog, the first song on here, is a really, really fast, frenetic song, kind of like Addicted to That Rush. They always like the heavy blues songs, too, like Price You Gotta Pay. That one was cool. And the last song on here is another cover song, the song that gave the band their name, song by Paul Rodgers and Free, called Mr. Big. Yeah, so I think we both got the same version here. The CD itself is kind of cool. Looks like a manhole cover.
Yeah.
Presumably the one that this guy popped his head out of. Even though I think they always use like different album art designers, they always had this sort of humor behind their album art. So this album did well for them basically everywhere in the world except for North America, because what do we know?
Yeah.
It was another 3 years before the next Mr. Big album came out. I thought this was quite a good album too. I just listened to it again today and thought, I do like this album.
This is my second favorite. It's my second favorite.
Yeah, it's good.
Take Cover is my track.
Hey,
man.
Take Cover's awesome. Take Cover is awesome. Take Cover was a big hit in Japan, actually. Like that would be a radio staple, I'm thinking. This is a Canadian Columbia House version.
As is mine.
Yeah, the disc itself is kind of cool. Same lineup at this point, I should say. It's the same four guys. Just got the lyrics and credits. Nothing too elaborate in their albums, but there doesn't need to be. So I think, Atlantic at this point it wasn't the end of their contract, but they spat out this, compilation without a lot of thought, called Big, Bigger, Biggest, the best of Mr. Big. It contained 3 new songs and one song that had only been available on a Japanese mini album or EP called Japandemonium. And it's a decent enough compilation if you just need a quick fix in Mr. Big. This is a Canadian copy. So much to my surprise, Paul Gilbert leaves. I don't know if there was any great animosity. I don't think there was. I know he did a couple solo albums, which I think that you said you've got a couple of his solo albums.
Yeah, I didn't pull it, but I have one of them. I can tell you the title.
King of Clubs.
It's a Japanese import. It is called Get Out of My Yard. And I picked that up in Mississauga at a record show. There's always one vendor there that sells Japanese imports. And I always got something from him every time. And it's very experimental.
And Paul Gilbert not only is he a fantastic guitar player, but he's a funny guy. Like you've ever seen interviews with him. He's very self-effacing, but he's just effortlessly good on the guitar.
Yes.
So the next album that came out in 1999, and it was called Get Over It. And this time around, the guitar was capably filled by a guy by the name of Richie Kotzen, who a lot of you people will recognize. That's one of Richie's early solo albums, Electric Joy.
Yeah, it's number
3. Of course, a lot of people know him from his brief stint in Poison on a very good album, I think, called Native Tongue.
Yep.
And so he was a good fit for Mr. Big. Also a great singer in his own right, which, Mr. Big, one of the things they were known for is they all sang. They could all sing harmony. Like their live shows sounded really good because they could all sing. And this album, of course, I got this up from Columbia House. I was a little surprised to see it. They're still on Atlantic at this point. And of course, this album sank without a trace. Again, in North America, I think the big single off of this one in Japan was called Super Fantastic. I think that was the big one.
Sounds about right.
And now you've got something that I don't have.
Yeah, I picked this up in a used CD shop in Hamilton, and Mr. Big, the best of the ballads, deep cuts, and it's 15 ballads. That's a lot of ballads, including some. I believe there's some re-records here, some new material, and I think a Japanese bonus track or two. But some of the tracks here that I do not particularly recognize, so I think they're new, are Where Are They Now? I'll Leave It Up to You. You Don't Have to Be Strong. And that's about it. That's what I think are probably the newer tracks. There's Super Fantastic is on here. Wild World is on here. And of course they close it with To Be With You.
Yeah.
It's nice though that they re-recorded some of the classic acoustic material with Kotzen. So Had Enough is a re-record, for example, and it's a little bit, just got a little tiny bit of funk to it. It's a little bit more funk. And that's appropriate considering Kotzen's a very funky player, if you ever hear his solo material. And he even brought that into Poison a little bit. But it's not a consistently great listen because you just need more hills and valleys. You know, it's something that it's something I pull to listen to one track at a time. And Had Enough, incidentally, it was a great ballad from that first album that you were talking about. And I thought if they ever did like a second single, it should have been Had Enough. But
you know, they did 2 videos. They did Addicted to That Rush, then they did Wind Me Up, one right after the other.
I did not ever get that.
I think they released the song Big Love to radio, but there was never a single for it. But yeah, Had Enough's a great ballad.
Yeah.
That could have done it for them on that first album. So could Anything for You. That was another good ballad on that first album. But
yeah.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
That's
so speaking of Japanese releases, this next one, I don't think actually came out in North America initially. I think it was reissued. So I've got a Japanese version of Actual Size. This came out in 2001.
Yeah.
This has a nice little slip case on it. And trying to get us, we don't have a glare here.
I don't have that one.
Probably not going to have. So this is the second of the 2 with Richie Kotzen. Now, this has a lot of goodies with it. So I empty that out. And anybody that's ever bought Japanese releases knows all about the Obi strip.
There it
is. These came on vinyl. These came on CDs.
Why do you have 2?
I've got 2 of these. I don't know. I bought it used. This booklet came with it. That's not the album cover, but it's just got pictures of each of the band members. This fell out of it, which I don't know what this is. It's got the Mr. Big logo on it and some Japanese writing, and then it says "Not for sale." So maybe this was a promo copy. I don't know.
That looks like a bookmark.
It's in a little package, so I'm not sure, but there it will stay in the package.
Yeah, why open it if you're not going to use it?
At the end of it, it's got their album releases. Again, there's a few different ones. Like there's Raw Like Sushi 2, which I don't have. There's Japandemonium.
Yeah,
and it's as recent. There's the deep cuts, and it is as recent as their there's a Live at Budokan. Again, they were huge in Japan. So now we get to the disc itself. And a big hit single off this album was called Shine, which is basically a Richie Kotzen song. And he continued to do that with the Winery Dogs. As a matter of fact, there's a version of it on the Winery Dogs live album, Unleashed in Japan. There's the little booklet with the Japanese writing inside of it. And, it's kind of cool because, of course, that's Richie's Telecaster. But, you got some guy on a train to make it look like the guitar is huge. Everything in here follows that, that sort of that vibe. And then they went on hiatus, they went on hiatus for quite a few years. But due to demand for them to get back together, they reunited the 4 original guys in the late 2000, 2008, 2009. They did a Live at Budokan album, which I don't have. And it's one of those ones that I should have bought when it first came out because now it's super expensive. We all know what that's about. But their first studio album. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So they signed with Frontiers Records, which is like the melodic rock label and the label that, reissues older bands that didn't, remain on a major label, which is a lot of good stuff. They released this album in 2011 and What If?
I played it just today.
really strong album. Undertow, the opening song, is fantastic. Nobody Left to Blame is another good heavy blues rocker. Yeah. It's well produced. Got a good ballad on here called All the Way Up. There's a couple of videos on here in the making of the record. This came with a bonus DVD. And just a good comeback. Like, you know, the thing about Mr. Big is they're an easy band to take for granted because they're all such good musicians. They write good songs. And if there's one drawback to being that good, it's that sometimes they don't stand out and it's hard to recall the individual songs. But then you put them on, you're like, oh yeah, this was really good. And in 2012, I actually picked this up not long ago. This is really good. Mr. Big, One Acoustic Night, live from the living room. This is on Frontiers Records. This is a 10-song. It's an acoustic set that they did. Most of the songs come from What If. Of the 10 songs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the 10 songs are from What If. So they're definitely promoting that album. And this shot of the band there. It's a very small setup, like literally looks like they set up in somebody's living room. But, you know, then you hear Eric Martin sing in this intimate environment, and the guy can just belt it out with the best of them. And they're all great singers. So yeah, it's fun. It's not a full album, but just happened to see it, and it wasn't that expensive. And then they released 2 more studio albums. To 2014, they came up with this one, The Stories We Could Tell.
Yeah.
This one's good too. I haven't listened to this one in a while, and I'm looking for the song titles, and none of them are coming to me. But I know it's good. That's the trouble. I know it's good. I like how the songs are all written in a different font on the back here. And
that's the same as the deep cuts is, which I don't think I showed the back, but not very focused, but different fonts. Yeah.
This is one where it's one of these digipacks, and this came unglued from the middle of it, which is another reason why I don't like digipacks. And then in 2017, and so far, this has been the most recent and probably will be the last Mr. Big album, Defying Gravity. And I did just listen to this today. Once again, they're using different fonts for each of the songs. This is really good.
It is. It comes really with a DVD.
Yeah. Yeah, I got the same version. We got the same version of these. And unfortunately, sadly, drummer Pat Torpey passed away from, I think it was Parkinson's, I think that he had. And then, so Matt Starr basically is credited, you know, also on this on drums, and he did the tour with them. But, you know, I don't know if there'll be another Mr. Big album. If there is, Matt Starr is going to be their drummer. But Pat was a really good, I really liked his hi-hat work. Like all you got to do is listen to Addicted to That Rush, where he goes from like just the consummate drummer. But they were all the consummate musicians. And if their catalog sounds a little samey from album to album to album, it's because of that consistency. They always went in, they always delivered. And, you know, another thing I liked about them is that even when they were quote unquote heavy, there was melody and there was some soulfulness, because Eric Martin can't help but sing and be soulful. He reminds me a little bit of Jeff Keith from Tesla.
Smoother,
but they've got that, there's a rasp there, and there's just I don't want to say twang. That's more Jeff Keith. But there's just a soul, like a deep soul in their voice. They open their mouth and it sounds that way. And do you know, 2 bands that Eric Martin had either auditioned for or had offers to audition for before Mr. Big? We're talking about circa 1985, 1986.
85, 86. Van Halen?
Bands that, yes. Now, Eric Martin said that in an interview with melodicrock.com, and he literally said he was too scared to go down to 5150. He was too scared. Now, would that have worked? Sure, it would have worked.
It would have been different, obviously, just like it was different.
With Sammy, but I mean, they would have written melodic songs, and, you know, would it have been as successful? I don't know, but that's just a wrinkle in history that never was. The other band was Toto that he was going to join, which that would have fit him too, because again, he's got that soul in his voice, right? He's
Yeah.
not just a rock singer, but anyway, yeah, great band. And I don't have quite all of the stuff. Like I don't have all their live albums. They've got so many, right?
You have a lot more than I do. But speaking of
now,
live, this single here, this has some stuff on it you might not have. 30 Days in the Hole live, but a different version from the album. Shy Boy live, which is a Talus David Lee Roth cover, and
cool.
Woman from Tokyo Baba O'Reilly medley.
Okay,
killer.
Yes, that is from Raw Like Sushi 2.
Okay,
which I don't have, and I've got the 45 single to Be With You. It's got the same cover as your CD single, and it's got Baba O'Reilly on the other side of it.
It's killer.
Yeah, they
did.
Yeah, they did great covers. One of the coolest things, and I've looked for it on YouTube. You know how some things on YouTube appear and then they're gone and then they appear again.
Yeah, don't know it.
I want to say about 2004. No, it wasn't 2000. That's not right. It had to have been later than that because YouTube wasn't around then. But they had some sort of Bay Area thing where they honored Sammy Hagar. And because I remember James Hetfield did the introduction, and he came out and he said, "Has anyone here ever driven over 55?" It was really funny. But there were some performances, and they had Eric Martin, and I don't know who the backing band was. It might have been some of Sammy's guys, but they did Rock Candy from the first Montrose album, and he killed it. Oh, it was good. I said, I want a studio recording this. Like Mr. Big, I'm really surprised. They should have done a covers album, just thrown a covers album out.
Yeah, actually, they could have. Another cover that Eric did. You're familiar with the Working Man Rush covers album.
I have that. Yeah, he did an awesome version of Mission.
Yeah. Oh, killer. And you wouldn't think it would work, but it does.
No, he sings it. That's a melodic song from Hold Your Fire. But Billy Sheehan, of course, is all over that album. And oddly enough, I think that's one of the first times that Billy and Mike Portnoy played together. And of course, those two and Richie Kotzen formed the Winery Dogs, which is a band that I just think is great. And as of this, as we record this, they're working on a third album, which is awesome. I wish Chickenfoot would do the same. But yeah, it's really good stuff. But so, Mike, thank you for talking a little Mr. Big here with me, which this was a lot of fun and has just got me listening to a lot of these albums. Anybody out there watching this, what are your favorite Mr. Big albums? Does anybody out there have a favorite Mr. Big album that isn't Lean Into It? I'm curious about that because honestly, I would have to say that's mine. And I think I'm like you, Mike. I think I'd put Hey Man at second. Yeah. And I don't think I'm exaggerating a bit when I say that What If, which was their first comeback or reunion album, comes in at number 3. That's how much I like that one too.
Wow.
But they've never had any clunkers really the whole way.
If anything, the first album, it doesn't launch like the rest of them do. It seems like maybe if they toured a bit or gotten to know each other a bit before they recorded, perhaps. But otherwise, it's pretty consistent.
Yeah, it's good stuff all the way through. And you're right. They were experienced musicians, but there's one thing to be an experienced musician, and there's another thing to have 3 other guys in the studio with you that you've never played with before. You don't know each other that well. And maybe you're kind of holding back a little bit. Not that there aren't great performances on that first album, but they found, and not only that, but they found the sound. Oh yeah. They actually found a sound. You hear them, you go, that sounds like Mr. Big, which that's rare because a lot of these super groups just sound like what they are. This amalgam that doesn't really fit together, but there it is. But no,
they made it fit.
Yeah, they managed to create their own sound. So, go listen to some Mr. Big, everybody. And follow the LaBrain Train. Friday nights are better with the LaBrain Train. And I've been fortunate enough to hitch a ride on the LaBrain Train a few times. And I'm sure there'll be more.
We'll do it
the
again.
album closer special we did was awesome. And so there you go. Another fun-filled edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Thanks for watching.
Cheers, Tim.